Over 100 years ago, archaeologists inside an ancient Egyptian tomb discovered what is believed to be the earliest known record of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. This fragile fragment of papyrus had once been used to wrap a mummy. Within its faded lines was a word that stood out: Hector. In Greek, Hector means to hold or possess. In essence, this papyrus served as a list of 7 world artifacts, each representing a key to power, mystery, and ancient glory. Following the clues inscribed in that ancient script, one could retrace the footsteps of long-forgotten civilizations and embark on a journey of discovery. On the Giza plateau, by the mighty Nile River, towering tombs were raised to guard pharaohs in their journey to the afterlife. Yet in the earliest days of pyramid construction, the landscape wasn't the arid desert we see today. It was a fertile plain, lush with green life. The word pyramid originates from ancient Greek. To the ancients, the pyramid was not merely a tomb. It was a celestial device meant to help the soul of the pharaoh reach immortality. By the 18th century, curiosity and superstition drove visitors to shout at the pyramid entrances, hoping to scare off tomb raiders or restless spirits that might still dwell inside. Treasure hunters would tunnel through walls, desperate to find whatever riches lay buried within. But the architects of these ancient structures had planned for such intrusions. Inside, anti-theft mechanisms were embedded, massive stone blocks rigged to fall if disturbed, sealing off sacred chambers from the impure. The burial chamber itself was encased in red granite, transported from Aswan, hundreds of kilometers to the south. But one of the tomb's most enigmatic features was a mysterious vertical shaft that pierced straight through to the outside. For years, it was dismissed as simple ventilation. But later analysis revealed its true purpose. It was precisely aligned with a specific star, believed to serve as a celestial tunnel through which the pharaoh's soul could ascend to the heavens and join the eternal stars. A century ago, exploring the pyramids required brute force, chisels, pickaxes, even explosives. But in modern times, preservation has become the priority. Today's archaeologists use tools more akin to medical scanners than mining equipment. Just a few years ago, a team of researchers made an astonishing discovery: a massive low-density void hidden directly above the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid. But its purpose and its contents remain a mystery. No one knows how to access it. No one knows what lies inside. What could be there? Khufu's mummy has never been found. Some scholars believe it may be hidden within that very chamber, still untouched, still waiting. The builders who raised the Great Pyramid were not a handful of slaves, but a vast, skilled workforce numbering in the tens of thousands. For over 35 years, archaeologists have uncovered a sprawling workers' city buried near the base of the pyramid. From the remnants of daily life, stone grain grinders, comb-patterned vessels, knives, storage jars, and even fishing hooks, they've pieced together a vivid portrait of these miracle makers. These discoveries reveal something remarkable. The workers weren't toiling non-stop under a whip. They had structured lives. They cooked, rested, socialized. They even had leisure time. In all, the craftsmen moved some 2.3 million stone blocks, completing the Great Pyramid over the course of 20 to 25 years. About 20 kilometers south of modern Cairo lies the site of Saqqara, home to Egypt's very first pyramid, the step pyramid of Pharaoh Djoser. Often considered the architectural prototype for all later pyramids, it marked the dawn of monumental stone construction in human history. Around its base, archaeologists have uncovered a vast trench system and a vertical shaft. But even more intriguing were the underground channels connecting these structures, channels that may have once carried water. One emerging theory suggests this was a water-powered elevator system, a brilliant innovation that used buoyancy to lift wooden platforms bearing massive stone blocks. This would have allowed construction crews to build upward from the inside, faster, safer, and with remarkable precision. Continuing the journey downstream along the Nile, we arrive at the second of the ancient wonders, the legendary city of Alexandria. Founded over 2,300 years ago by none other than Alexander the Great, Alexandria was more than a city. It was a symbol of empire, ambition, and intellectual power. At its height, it had the capacity to host 300 warships, a naval stronghold rivaled by few. But its strategic coastal location also came with peril. Treacherous reefs and shallow waters made entry dangerous. To solve this, the ancients erected one of the most iconic structures of the ancient world, the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Completed around 280 BCE, it stood as a beacon to guide ships safely into port. Towering over the harbor, its light was visible for miles. Unlike the Great Pyramid, however, the Lighthouse of Alexandria has not survived the centuries. Earthquakes, erosion, and time itself have swept it into the sea. But its legacy endures, as both a marvel of engineering and a symbol of mankind's eternal drive to illuminate the unknown. Around 700 years ago, a powerful earthquake brought the Lighthouse of Alexandria crashing down. Its original site was a small island called Pharos, giving rise to its enduring name, the Lighthouse of Pharos. Today, a stone fortress stands on that very location. Within its walls lie the last visible traces of the ancient lighthouse. About 900 years ago, a Spanish architect named Al-Balawi passed through this region on his pilgrimage to Mecca. Fascinated by the structure, he documented in detail the lighthouse's exterior and interior. According to his account, the base was composed of 3 stacked segments, starting with a square foundation, rising into an octagonal midsection, and crowned with a circular tower at the top. For the past 3 decades, archaeological teams have explored the ruins beneath the waves off Alexandria's coast. Among the most striking finds is a massive column that once marked the lighthouse entrance. It measures 13 meters in length and lies broken into several pieces, 2 of which alone weigh over 70 tons. Divers have captured thousands of underwater photographs to digitally reconstruct over 5,000 submerged stone blocks. Thanks to these efforts, underwater archaeology has filled in the gaps left by ancient texts, enabling scholars to reimagine the Lighthouse of Pharos in remarkable detail. The structure soared skyward in 3 monumental tiers, second in height only to the Great Pyramid of Giza. At its grand entrance was a passageway over 100 meters long, flanked by colossal statues. Mythical sea creatures were carved into the surrounding stone, guardians of the gateway. At the summit, a towering flame blazed, fueled by thick burning bitumen, casting smoke signals visible for miles. Standing vigil at the entrance were massive statues of Ptolemy II and his queen, Arsinoe. These statues, long swallowed by the sea, were recovered during underwater excavations in the 1990s. One of them now stands proudly beside the modern Library of Alexandria. Alexandria was more than a harbor city. It was a vibrant cultural nexus where civilizations met. Beneath its surface lies an underground tomb dating back 1,800 years. Its doorway is watched over by Egyptian gods. Inside, Greek shields bear the petrifying face of Medusa, while Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the dead, is shown clad in Roman military armor. It was a fusion of mythologies, philosophies, and empires, a true melting pot of ideas and inspirations. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was more than a marvel of stone and fire. It was a monument to human ingenuity, to vision and ambition, to wisdom shining across the waves. As we leave Alexandria behind, the journey continues toward another ancient wonder that once stood tall in the Aegean, the island of Rhodes. In ancient times, a colossal statue once towered over the island of Rhodes, dedicated to the sun god Helios. Legend tells of the giant's feet resting atop two immense pillars, one on each side of the harbor's entrance, spanning the width of the port itself. But the exact location of the Colossus remains uncertain. According to historical records, it was constructed in the 3rd century BCE and was tragically destroyed by an earthquake only a few decades later. Even in its ruined state, the remnants continued to draw curious travelers from across the ancient world. Why did the people of Rhodes build such a towering bronze monument in the first place? Massive stones preserved in the local museum provide clues. These stones were once projectiles hurled by enemies during attacks on the city. In 332 BCE, Rhodes became part of Alexander the Great's expanding empire. With its strategic position and flourishing economy, the island became a coveted prize. Soon, rival powers launched a brutal siege involving over 40,000 soldiers. But Rhodes endured. After a hard-fought campaign, the invaders were forced to retreat, leaving behind towering war machines, some as tall as 9 stories, along with vast quantities of bronze and iron ammunition. Legend has it that the Rhodians melted down this abandoned weaponry and transformed it into a statue, an offering of peace, forged from the instruments of war and dedicated to their protective deity, Helios. The man behind the statue was a sculptor named Charis from the town of Lindos on Rhodes. He had studied under Lysippos, the personal sculptor of Alexander the Great. Drawing inspiration from his mentor's works, Charis modeled the Colossus of Helios in the likeness of Alexander himself, and indeed, accounts describe the resemblance as striking. The Colossus was more than a tribute to a sun god. It became a lasting memorial to Alexander, whose spirit still loomed large over the Hellenistic world. The statue's face was cast with a raised chin, proud and serene, framed by flowing curls and a radiant solar crown. In one hand, he held aloft a burning torch, a symbol of enlightenment piercing the skies. An ancient writer named Thalos once remarked that the construction of the Colossus consumed nearly all the bronze available across the region. While that may have been an exaggeration, archaeological discoveries confirm just how much metal and craftsmanship were devoted to its creation. The techniques used by these ancient artisans still astound modern scholars. Every joint, every casting, every rivet was carefully planned and executed to achieve not only monumental scale, but artistic perfection. So far, the remains of 8 foundries have been discovered at the site. These have been identified as bronze casting workshops, and their dates align perfectly with the estimated period during which the statue was constructed. Bronze was essential, not just for its material properties, but for enabling the statue to stand firmly and lastingly. Special clamps had to be embedded deep within the structure, indicating a highly advanced technique for the time. The statue wasn't cast as a single piece. Instead, it was constructed in segments, much like assembling a giant puzzle. Large sections were joined together at first, followed by smaller components fitted precisely into place. The outer shell of the Colossus was surprisingly thin, less than a centimeter thick, essentially forming a hollow monument. According to the ancient writer Strabo, the Colossus stood 70 cubits tall, or about 33 meters. But the harbor it supposedly straddled measured around 118 meters in width. This crucial fact debunks the myth that the statue once stood with its legs spanning the entire harbor entrance. Another writer from antiquity, Philo, documented the construction method in more detail. The process began with a partially buried base. From there, the structure was built upward, layer by layer, like stacking pieces of a vertical jigsaw puzzle. To accommodate this method, a massive open space was required. Philo noted that the construction site had a diameter of approximately 102 meters. This space was most likely situated at the island's highest point. Placing the Colossus there allowed it to overlook the entire harbor and also serve as a symbolic lighthouse for approaching ships. More than just a beacon, the statue stood as a proud emblem of the strength and grandeur of Rhodes. Roughly 800 kilometers west of Rhodes, across the sea, lies the Peloponnesian Peninsula, home to the ruins of ancient Olympia. It was here, in 776 BCE, that the very first Olympic Games were held. At the heart of this sacred site once stood another colossal figure, the statue of Zeus. Towering at 13 meters tall, it was the largest indoor statue ever created in ancient history. Zeus was portrayed seated on a gilded throne, holding a scepter in one hand and a finely crafted figure of Nike, the goddess of victory, in the other. At his feet rested a basin filled with olive oil. This awe-inspiring statue was more than just a religious symbol. It was a testament to the reverence ancient Greece held for both divine power and human physical excellence. It embodied the spirit of competition and the cultural ideals of an entire civilization. To the ancient Greeks, the Olympic Games did not simply mark a sporting tradition. They marked the very beginning of time itself. All historical records were dated in reference to the Olympiads, making the Games a central axis of chronology. During each Olympic festival, a sacred truce was declared across the entire Greek world. Wars paused, and rivalries were set aside to honor the gods and celebrate human excellence. In the year 472 BCE, construction began on a monumental tribute to Zeus, the grand temple of Zeus at Olympia. The sculptor entrusted with this divine task was Phidias, a master artist already renowned in Athens for his contributions to the Parthenon. He accepted the commission as a 5-year endeavor, dedicating himself fully to the vision. Phidias built his workshop as an exact replica of the interior of the Zeus temple. This allowed him to test the proportions and lighting conditions before any final assembly, ensuring the statue would be perfectly harmonious with its surroundings. Subtle traces found within the workshop reveal how meticulous his planning was. Materials for the statue were gathered from across the known world. With this evidence, scholars today have been able to reconstruct an image of its former grandeur. The ivory used for the skin gave the figure a luminous, almost living quality. Glass ornaments added depth and sparkle, while gold gilding on the throne and robes caught and reflected the light brilliantly. When sunlight poured through the open temple doors, it illuminated the entire statue in a majestic golden aura. The effect must have been overwhelming, radiant, divine, and unforgettable. Athletes who triumphed in the presence of Zeus were crowned with olive wreaths and hailed as heroes. The Olympics were not only a display of physical prowess, but a sacred celebration of destiny shaped by the gods themselves. However, this golden era came to an end in 393 CE. As the Roman Empire embraced Christianity, the Olympic Games were condemned as remnants of paganism and officially abolished. Not long after, an earthquake devastated the Temple of Zeus. The statue was removed, carefully transported by ship to Constantinople, the new capital of the empire. There it stood for several decades within the palace, still revered, though far from its original home. Ultimately, however, the statue met a tragic end, consumed in a great fire that erased it from the world forever. Leaving behind the ruins of Olympia and its divine statue, the journey continues. After 4 days of sea travel, we arrive in what is now modern-day Bodrum, Turkey. In antiquity, this city was known as Halicarnassus. Here stood yet another marvel of the ancient world, the Mausoleum of Mausolus, one of the legendary 7 wonders. King Mausolus ruled this region more than 2,000 years ago, watching over a thriving land. When he came to power around 2,400 years ago, one of his first decisions was to relocate the capital to the coastline. From this new vantage point, he established trade routes with Egypt, Persia, and Ionia, gradually building a prosperous and influential state. Under his leadership, Halicarnassus was transformed into a cosmopolitan hub, a city that blended the art, architecture, and philosophies of many cultures. Today, the foundations of his grand mausoleum still rise slightly above the ground, silent echoes of an ancient dream. At the heart of this site was the royal burial chamber. Originally, each wall of the structure extended over 30 meters in length, while the entire mausoleum stood at an astonishing height of more than 42 meters. Its design featured elegant Greek columns and was crowned with a stepped pyramid. Atop this pyramid stood majestic statues of Mausolus and his queen, Artemisia, riding together in a chariot pulled by 4 horses. The entire monument was once adorned with over 400 intricate sculptures, each one narrating stories that spoke to the city's international reach and cultural diversity. According to the Roman writer Pliny, the royal couple commissioned the finest artists of their time to embellish the mausoleum with masterful works. Archaeological findings suggest that Mausolus was deeply invested in shaping his legacy, driven by a desire to be remembered for generations to come. When these sculptures were unearthed, traces of ancient paint were still visible on their surfaces, revealing that the monument was once vividly colored, not the plain white marble we often imagine today. It was a structure meant to dazzle, with color, form, and symbolism. Yet Mausolus never lived to see his vision completed. He died in 353 BCE, before the mausoleum reached its final form. Excavations at the site reveal that his funeral was a grand and solemn event, fit for a ruler of such ambition. Legend tells a tragic tale that Queen Artemisia, overwhelmed by grief, mixed her husband's ashes with water and drank them, ultimately dying of sorrow. While moving, this story likely reflects myth more than fact. In truth, Artemisia devoted herself to honoring Mausolus's legacy. She continued the construction of the mausoleum for 2 more years, and in the end, it was Queen Artemisia who saw the entire mausoleum through to completion. Her devotion ensured that the grand vision shared with her late husband became reality. Centuries later, in the 15th century CE, a powerful earthquake struck the region. The once magnificent stones and sculptures of the mausoleum collapsed into ruin. In time, these remains were repurposed, taken by the Knights Hospitaller to construct the nearby castle of St. Peter. Ironically, the castle was built directly atop the ancient palace ruins of Mausolus and Artemisia. Though transformed in form, the legacy of their wonder lived on, its stones still standing, just under a different name. From Halicarnassus, the journey continues across more than 1,500 kilometers to the land once known as Mesopotamia. It was here, around 2,600 years ago, that one of the most elusive of the seven wonders was said to have stood, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Despite many decades of archaeological excavations at the ruins of ancient Babylon, no definitive evidence of the gardens has been found. Their physical remains are missing, perhaps lost to time, or perhaps never located where tradition claimed. So instead, we must follow other clues: fragmented records, ancient texts, and enduring legends. Writers from antiquity described the Hanging Gardens in striking detail. Vibrant greenery cascading beside flowing water, blossoms radiant as colored mosaics. These descriptions evoke scenes not only of Babylon, but also of later cities like Istanbul, where Byzantine emperors and later Ottoman sultans constructed exquisite palaces surrounded by lush pleasure gardens. The precise location of the Hanging Gardens remains unknown. But what we do know is that Mesopotamian rulers had a long and impressive tradition of creating massive irrigated gardens. These were not simply ornamental. They were feats of engineering designed to overcome the region's harsh climate. To deal with seasonal droughts and sudden floods, the Mesopotamians engineered clever systems to lift and redirect water. Ancient records speak of a spiral mechanism used to raise river water to elevated terraces, a kind of early hydraulic innovation. Inside the fortified palace walls, they built lush, green paradises. These were more than gardens. They were symbols of control over nature, of peace amidst chaos. In fact, the very word paradise traces back to Eastern languages, where it originally meant a walled garden. There is also an alternative theory. Perhaps the famed Hanging Gardens were not located in Babylon at all. Roughly 400 kilometers to the north lies the ancient city of Nineveh. There, within the palace of the Assyrian kings, archaeologists have uncovered traces of grand gardens, evidenced not just by text, but by beautifully carved stone reliefs that depict terraced landscapes fed by elaborate aqueducts. These inscriptions and carvings speak volumes. They show trees rooted high above ground level, water flowing upward, and lush vegetation thriving in carefully cultivated tiers, details strikingly similar to descriptions of the legendary gardens. No matter what the truth is, the Hanging Gardens remain a vision of paradise on Earth. Perhaps that is why they continue to flourish so vividly within the human imagination. Sailing 800 kilometers south, we arrive at the final wonder among the seven wonders of the ancient world. In this legendary city once stood one of the most sacred temples of antiquity, the Temple of Artemis. Ephesus, an ancient city that once lay under Greek control and later rose to become the capital of a major Roman province, was home to this awe-inspiring structure. With a population surpassing 250,000 people, Ephesus was a thriving metropolis. The Temple of Artemis, first constructed in the 6th century BCE, was widely regarded as the crowning achievement of all Greek temples. It measured 130 meters in length and 70 meters in width, surrounded by 127 magnificent columns, a structure twice the size of the Parthenon in Athens. Its pediments and base were adorned with masterful carvings, a testament to the finest craftsmanship of the era. On certain sacred festivals, a wooden statue of the goddess Artemis would be paraded through the streets. A grand avenue stretched 3 kilometers from the temple to the heart of the city. Leading this procession were young girls, dressed in their most radiant attire. The air shimmered with fragrant incense, and vibrant music echoed as red threads were tied around the wrists of the faithful, a gesture of devotion, seeking the protection of the great goddess Artemis. But even a goddess could not shield everyone. Cleopatra's sister, Arsinoe IV of Egypt, once sought sanctuary within the temple walls. However, her enemies found her. She was dragged from the sacred grounds and executed on the very steps of the temple. 2,000 years ago, people also journeyed here for another reason. A major trade route extended from Babylon in the east, cutting through this region on its way to Sardis, one of the wealthiest cities in the ancient world and the capital of the Lydian kingdom. Its ruler was the famed King Croesus. Legend has it, Croesus's immense wealth was said to trace back to King Midas, the mythical ruler who could turn everything he touched into gold. But the truth lay in the hills above Sardis, which were rich in gold and silver deposits. Thanks to these natural resources, Croesus became the first person in history to mint gold coins. He and his dynasty established one of the earliest known monetary economies in the world, right in Sardis. And this seemingly simple invention, currency, would forever alter the fate of the Temple of Artemis. As Croesus expanded his realm, he eventually conquered Ephesus. Determined to demonstrate his devotion and power, he spared no expense, commissioning a bronze statue of a bull and sheathing the temple's columns in shimmering gold. Yet even such splendor could not withstand the march of time. In the year 262 CE, a catastrophic event reduced the temple to ruins. The seven wonders of the ancient world continue to stir awe, not only for their immense scale and architectural genius, but for the rich stories that surround them. It is these very stories that have allowed them to transcend the bounds of history and live on as eternal legends.